Hi guys, Jane here, and we are talking today in our Writers Corner about joining a writers group. And people have very different opinions about this and whether they are valuable and useful or not. I have tried 3 different writers groups and I found one that really worked for me and I absolutely love it and I highly recommend, if you can find the right group, doing so. My writers group has helped me grow so much and I've met so many people and I love them and it has been just an amazing experience. However, I've also seen a lot of comments on forums and I kind of understand where some of the issues people are having with their writers group come about. So I wanted to talk about what you should consider before joining a writers group to help you make the best decision about that writers group, or what writers group you should join. And number one is, why do you want to join a writers group to begin with? What are you looking for from the group? Two of the groups that I tried, including the one I stayed at, are teaching groups. So we would have somebody get up and give a lesson and maybe do a writing exercise together and share the writing exercise. And, the group that I'm in, we do projects together. It's a very involved group. One of the things we don't do is group critiques, at least so far. I've been in the group a year and a half and we have not yet done like a group critique on people's work. Now, another group that I went to several meetings of, they did do group critiques. People submitted and everybody got an email of their story and they did critiques. And that was neat. It wasn't necessarily something I wanted to participate in because I didn't feel it was appropriate for me. And that was one complaint I heard a lot of people say, is that, those people in the writing groups that do critiques, they just don't know anything. Here's the thing. I think to do critiques well, you really need to have rules about what you're doing. And to focus on this doesn't work / this doesn't make sense, or I really like this, or it made me laugh, instead of I think you should do X, Y, and Z different. Because I think that's where you get into kind of troubled water. If you're just saying, hey, this didn't really make sense, the writer can be like, okay, well, I didn't want that to make sense, or I did. Or, I didn't really jive with this ending. Something, I think in too many critique groups, people get too specific of, oh, I think you should do it this way. And the other thing that can be a challenge is if you don't read in that genre and you don't write in that genre, there may be stuff that is happening in the book that you are saying is not right or might think shouldn't be that way, but that's typical of the genre. Like pacing. Pacing for some genres is really slow, typically, and pacing for some genres is really fast. And so if you're going into a thriller going, oh my gosh, the pacing was so fast because you read a lot of epic fantasy that's like 200,000 words, it's hard to give good critiques on genres you don't read and genres you don't write. So that can definitely be a case where if you're looking for critiques, finding the right group can be a challenge. And if you're looking for a teaching group, are you going to be expected to teach? Do the people that are up teaching seem like they know what they're talking about? Are they talking about topics that are valuable to you? One of the challenges I have, and I love my writers group, is that it's a fairly large group. There are about 15 members that come regularly. Of those, there is one person who does technical writing as their day job and also does editing and teaches at a college level. He's got a good lot of experience there, especially on the theoretical writing part. There's one author who has quite a few traditionally published books. There's me, who has quite a few indie published books. There's a couple other writers who have indie published and or a mixture of indie and traditional. But there's only like 5 or 6 of us out of 15 who have any real experience, and almost everybody else is kind of starting out. So that can make it hard to learn stuff for me that is valuable at the level I'm at in my writing career. Like, it's nice because I get to meet people and hang out with people, and every now and then I might get that tidbit pearl of wisdom, like, oh, I never thought of that before. But, we're still very much, and I do teach in that group, we're still very much teaching more basic stuff as opposed to stuff that is more valuable when you are a ghostwriter and have written 30 books. I don't know how many books I've written. That's how many I've written. A lot. So like that can be a challenge. And if you're really advanced, it can be frustrating, especially if you don't want to teach, to be in a group where you're still teaching the basics of, how do we create a good, compelling character? So that was number one. Number two, and that kind of plays into this next part, is the group that you're looking at. Where are they compared to where you are? My opinion is that most people need a group that has at least a few people who are more experienced than them and or as experienced as them. I feel like if you really want to be a writer and are coming into a group where, you're kind of new and there's quite a few people with experience, you're going to learn a lot. Now, it might be intimidating maybe if you are just starting out and everybody is like 30 books into their series published. You got to find a group that's the right mix for you. The one group that I went to, I was the only person that had put out a book. And that felt kind of frustrating because I felt like I'm not sure how much I can learn from everybody here. And that just didn't feel like a good mix. But the group that I'm part of now, as I mentioned, there are several other writers who are kind of on my level. There's a couple that are probably a little more experienced. And then there's quite a few that are less experienced. And it's a really nice dynamic because everybody has people that they can learn from as well as share information with. Whereas in the group that I was part of, or that I went to a few times, where I was the most experienced writer, I felt like I could teach, but I didn't feel like there were many people there I could learn from. Number three, how big is the group and how exclusive is the membership? So our group, the group that I am a permanent fixture of, has an open membership. Anybody can join who wants to. And this is both good and bad. Number one, because we get a lot of people who come in and come to some meetings, but not very many. We never know for sure how many people are going to be there. And there's maybe, a few people that you get really close to, but you get new people all the time. And new people can be good or they can cause problems. We had a meeting several months ago where we had a person come in and they were being pretty rude at the meeting. And, that can happen when you have to let anybody in. On the other hand, if it's really exclusive, is it exclusive because the people are just good? And like for a critique group, it makes sense to be kind of exclusive so you know about people's experience. But is it exclusive because people are just good or you're critiquing, or is it exclusive because of snobbery? Because that can be a real issue, is people thinking that they're the best and their way is the only way. And in writers' circles, that's a huge problem in general. Like, we all need to back up and remember that our writing goals are different. I want to be a full-time writer someday, but that doesn't mean everybody who's in the writing group does. There's some people who just want some support while they write poetry in their journals, and that's fine. And that is a perfectly valuable desire. So if you're in an exclusive group, why is it exclusive? And if it's a snobbery thing, is that something that's going to bother you? Are those people going to be really elitist and maybe not in line with your values and what you're looking for as a writer. You know, are they maybe very literary and what you write is genre fiction and you're not going to fit in real well? Does the group do critiques, and are they the right group for providing feedback for you? And I kind of touched that already on like what's everybody's experience and what do they write. But I'm going to go a little more in depth. One of the groups I visited had mostly Christian writers. It wasn't like an exclusive Christian writer group, but the main core people in the group, it was a fairly small group. There was 5 members, and of them, 3 were Christian writers. And I'm a romance writer, and I do write Christian romance under a pen name, but that wasn't the majority of what I write. And so I knew that they were not the right people to critique my books. They were the group that did a lot of the critiques. They were not the right group to critique my stories. If you write in a certain genre that's going to offend the other people in the critique group, probably not right for you. If they write in a genre very different from you, or that you're going to be offended by, you're probably not the right person for that group. My personal opinion is if you're joining a writing group for critiques, it should be of people who have very similar A, experience, and B, are writing in similar genres. So I don't think it's very valuable to have a romance writer and a fantasy writer and a thriller writer critiquing each other's work. Whereas like you could probably get away with police procedurals, cozy mysteries, and suspense thrillers. Like that, those kind of work together. Or even romance and cozy mysteries, because those have a lot of the same elements. But just, if you're looking for a group to do critiques, making sure they're the right group for you. And another thing to consider, number 5, is there some form of leadership or structure? Groups can get out of control really, really easily if nobody seems to be in charge. And one of the groups I went to, that was kind of an issue. Like, there was nobody that seemed to be in charge. The group I'm part of now, we very, very much have a leader, and she makes sure that everything stays orderly. She makes sure if we get too far off topic to bring us back. She's a strong personality, but I mean that in the best of ways. Like, she is a strong leader, and she's going to make sure that the group is doing what it needs to do and is not getting too far off topic. Number 6. Does your genre and personality fit with the group in general? And this is a tricky one. Some groups have really, really strong personalities or really, really strong leanings towards certain types of writing or fiction, or writing or genres. And you don't want to be in a group that is too far away from what you do. So if you're in a group and everybody writes very literary stuff versus you who writes genre fiction or vice versa, you're probably going to find that it's hard for you to help each other out very much. The same is true if like you write almost exclusively nonfiction and the writers group you're in is almost exclusively fiction. It is most helpful to be in a group that is similar to what you write. If you aren't, I feel like you're going to have clashes. And you can also have clashes if there's a lot of difference, like for instance, in the very religious group. I wasn't always comfortable at some of the meetings because I am not a particularly religious person. Like, I'm more spiritual than religious. And so some of the meetings, the critique group I went to that had a lot of people who wrote Christian fiction, some of the meetings were just very uncomfortable for me because it got into discussions that were very like the whole hour of the meeting was just a religious debate, which I had no dog in that fight. And not that it was necessarily a fight, but it definitely got uncomfortable. And I didn't feel like that was the right place for me or the right people for me. And again, I wasn't offended, I just didn't feel like I belonged there. So finding your tribe, basically. And the last of the points about things you should consider before joining a writing group. Is there a cost to it, and or do you feel like they are trying to get money from you? And this can be a slippery slope. The critique group that I mentioned, they had different levels of membership, and at certain levels you could do certain things, at certain levels you could do other things, and like there was a free level, which is what I was at, but there were also like levels up the group that you could pay for. And like for critiquing, you could critique other people's stuff no matter how, like which membership level you were, but you had to pay to have critiques. And that didn't totally bother me, but it would have if I'd have been a permanent member of that group. Like I was just there visiting, I knew I wasn't gonna stay, I was just kind of checking it out. It was fun, definitely not something I was okay with. The other group that I visited, the very first meeting I went to, and I only went to 2 meetings with this group, 1 or 2, it wasn't very many. But I know one of the big things that turned me off is they had a person teaching, and basically it felt like they weren't really teaching but trying to sell their services, because they were I don't remember exactly what it was, but it just felt like the whole thing was a sales pitch for her services. Oh, she was an author mentor, I think it was, but she only had like 1 book out, and it was a nonfiction book about being a writer, but like she didn't have any fiction books out. And I was like, do you have experience being a writer? And she very well might have. I didn't find it, but it was just one of those things, like she was charging like quite a few, like hundreds of dollars a month to advise writers. And I don't necessarily have an opinion about that service. It wasn't for me for sure. I felt like I had a little more experience with at least my market and genre, that I didn't feel like it was worth the $300 a month. But certainly I didn't like feeling like I was just there to be sold to. And so you never want to feel that way in a writing group. So if it feels like the people in charge are just trying to sell stuff to you, proceed with caution. So those are the things, I do believe there's 7, that you should think about or look at before considering joining a writing group. Writing groups are not for everybody, but they can be so valuable when you do join them. I love my writers group, and I have grown so much in the past 1.5 years of being part of it. So finding the right group is important, but if you do, it can be amazing. Just, beware, try out different groups. Don't feel like you have to settle for one, and be careful, because some groups seem like they're trying to make your money. Some can become toxic with different personalities, and some are just not a good fit for you. So I hope those ideas and tips have been helpful, and I hope you find a writers group you really like if that is something you want to do, and if you can find one that does what you're looking for a group to do. It's really important to go in knowing your why, because if you don't know your why, you don't know if the group does what you need. All right, social media below. If you have any comments about writers groups, any experience, any thoughts, feel free to leave them. Like and subscribe, and it's Jane. See you next time. Bye.